One day, Sammy's mother accidentally stepped on a music sheet, sparking an idea that would change everything. He went to his room, took out some film, and used a needle to puncture the frames, creating the effect of sparks from a gunshot. When he showed this at school, his classmates and his supportive father were amazed. From then on, he kept experimenting with special effects. He made a landmine effect with a dust-covered board that looked realistic when stepped on. He used firecrackers in the dirt to simulate machine gun fire and added blood packs for lifelike battles. But Sammy felt something was still missing. A film needed more than just realism. It required a special touch. It felt like he had ordered his own soldiers to their deaths and could only stand by and watch. The actor grasped what he wanted. In the last shot, as the actor exited, his eyes brimmed with sorrow. He exited quietly, and Sammy was profoundly touched. He hadn't realized that such simplicity could add so much depth to the film. The actor appeared genuinely devastated and only regained composure after the shoot, setting the stage for Sammy's future as a master filmmaker. The realistic scenes once again amazed his classmates, and the final shot moved everyone in the audience. When it was over, his mother wanted to praise him, but he quietly walked away, followed by the uncle who had always cared for him. His mother was confused and approached his father in a daze, unaware that Sammy had his reasons for everything he did. In 1952, Sammy's parents took him to the cinema for the first time, but he was initially very resistant. Because everything seemed enormous, his father patiently explained it all. This was his first movie experience. The lifelike film left him in awe, and he couldn't sleep for hours after getting home. Eager to recreate it, he asked his father for a toy train. My mother secretly brought my father's video recorder and asked him to make a movie to record it, and immediately after I took it, I watched it with my mother. His mother felt proud of his work. To shoot more scenes, she involved her two sisters, turning the household into a chaotic mess. Sammy used all the toilet paper to film a mummy scene. The next day, his uncle visited. She had a great sense of humor and connected well with the kids. Unlike the father's stiffness, she smiled more around the uncle. When a new baby arrived, the father announced a job promotion and decided to move the family to Arizona. Sammy's uncle was supposed to stay, but mother opposed father's plan. Ultimately, she took uncle to Arizona with them. As time went on, Sammy's hobby turned into a career. He invested heavily in editing gear, but his father still saw it as a pointless hobby. One day, Sammy's grandmother died. His father bought new editing equipment for his mother and asked her to edit the old film reels. He asked her to make a special compilation to cope with her grief. However, while editing, she uncovered something devastating. Sammy uncovered his mother's secret in the film. He wished it was a mistake, but her eyes told the truth. Sammy wrote a letter to his mother about what he had found. She was very pleased with the film and hugged him, but Sammy couldn't face her. From that point, he frequently argued with his mother until she lost her temper and slapped him in anger. Sammy retreated to his room, a red mark on his face. His mother followed, but he was hostile. She wanted to know why he was acting this way. Sammy took out the film reel and led her to the screening room. He had spliced together all the scenes of his mother and uncle. It was only then that she understood her son's behavior. After viewing it, she trembled and unplugged the projector. Sammy hurried to her, assuring he wouldn't tell anyone. This convinced his mother, who had been reluctant, to agree to the move. Sammy planned to sell his camera, but unexpectedly encountered his uncle. His uncle even gave him a brand new video camera, but Sammy didn't want to accept anything from the man who had broken up their family, until his uncle said that giving up would hurt his mother. Only then did Sammy accept it, but to distance himself, he handed over all. He knew it was wrong, but he couldn't help his emotions. Just then, Sammy noticed he still had money in his pocket. From that point, Sammy's family headed to California. His father shared a bizarre dream about punching Sammy's uncle. This upset his mother even more, prompting her to leave a car to hide her feelings. Sammy followed, and she assured him she had never crossed the line. She had wanted to discuss their issues with her husband, but he always acted like there was no problem. She didn't want to selfishly destroy their family. However, the new environment wasn't as good. Sammy's mother grew more depressed, and Sammy put away his camera. After school, he faced bullying for being Jewish. At home, he discovered his mother had adopted a monkey, which caused chaos. The monkey was even named after Sammy's uncle. Her husband wished she would return to normal, but he had known for years. He had known for a long time that his wife's heart wasn't with him, but he endured it for the sake of their relationship. Now, he wished she could finally let go, but she was unwilling. He opened the cupboard and found "hello" written on the bread. Despite his caution, he accidentally saw the school bully kissing someone. Panicking, he fled and ran into the bully's friends. Looking back, he saw the bully and his girlfriend. Cornered, the bully mocked Sammy to show off, but the girlfriend got mad and defended him, which made things worse. Under the pressure, Sammy couldn't stay silent, so he told the bully's girlfriend that her boyfriend had been making out with a red-haired girl half an hour ago. As expected, Sammy got a severe beating. The bully even made her explain that it was all a lie. That night, she took out her long unused video camera and listened to the sound of it working. The next day, she talked to Dia. Dia was clever. If it was a lie, she wouldn't have known about the red hair. This led her to befriend Dia's friend, Monica, and unpredictably, they became a couple. With Monica's help, she picked up photography again. Sami got a new camera and recorded school activities on the beach. Soon, with his father's hard work, the family relocated. Yet, his mother's eyes remained lifeless. Eventually, she told the children everything. She was leaving for Arizona during the graduation party. Sami hoped Monica would go to Los Angeles with him, but she had her own plans, so she returned the necklace Sami had given her. It was a silent breakup. The final part of the party was a film Sami had made, a few minutes of humor. The letdown came when the bully's friend made a move. The mood hit its climax, and she unexpectedly caught all the bully's best moments. Those thrilling slow-motion shots, mixed with awkwardness, were seen by both her and the bully. The bully was touched by the video and decided to leave his bad friends. Yadi made peace with him too. Sami slumped in the hallway, grappling with family issues and a failed romance. The bully showed up, asking why Sami made him look so heroic. Sami was fed up with the bully's nonsense, but his relentless nagging pushed him over the edge. Just be nice to me for 5 minutes. Or maybe I did it for the sake of the film. The bully broke down. You made me look like my ideal self, but I'm just a pathetic. Just then, the bully's friend charged at Sami, but the bully intervened just in time. That's the magic of film. It can transform someone's nature. The bully's friend fled, hoping Sami wouldn't reveal his moment of weakness. He was just feeling sad. Before leaving, he said life is not like the movies. Sami followed his father to Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, he got a response from Columbia Pictures. He gave his recommendation letter to the boss, who seemed thoughtful after reading it. Then he met the renowned director John Ford, who was succinct. Ford pointed out a painting with the horizon at the bottom. Next, he showed Sami a painting with the horizon at the top and remarked that a horizon at the bottom is very interesting. But when the horizon is at the top, it's still quite interesting. If it's in the middle, though, it's very dull. Finally, he wished me good luck. Then get out of my office. As Sami left, he turned back to say thank you. Outside, he took a deep breath. He understood that movies aren't just about the story. Framing is crucial too. Sami fully embraced filmmaking. The final shot is intriguing. Notice the horizon's position. That's how the film concludes. It's based on a true story. It recounts Spielberg's early years. Despite the saying that family scandals should stay private, he shared them through his film. Movies are art. Maybe this is how he makes sense of his life. Or perhaps openness is his art. Human emotions are complex. Anything can happen. And art is about facing reality and presenting it as much as possible. The rest is left for the world to ponder. One of history's most successful directors, when creating his biography, he chose not to center the story on himself, opting for an outsider's view. In the film's conclusion, he applied John Ford's lessons. He addressed everyone's questions. Any perspective can show a different life, but don't waver in the middle. Even though Sami's mother left, she still loved her husband and all the children at home. Her decision might have been selfish, but she also gave up her piano career. She devoted herself entirely to the family. One person raised the children. As she once said, everything happens for a reason. Maybe she just fell out of love. No one is born a genius. Likewise, no one is born a fool. The times, the environment and experiences mold this master filmmaker. People are adaptable, but life's framework can be limiting. It subtly shapes who we become, but we can still work within it to become who we aspire to be. This is a typical cheating scenario during Indian college entrance exams. Students have cheat sheets on their desks until the teacher says, throw them away. Even if you cheat, you won't get the answers right, the teacher said. Last year was the same, and many still failed. So, the school decided to write the answers on the blackboard. Everyone celebrated, confident there'd be no issues this time. But then, the police showed up. The principal hurriedly took the chief outside for a chat. He explained that it was a tradition because these students couldn't pass despite their efforts. They needed some help to graduate. Otherwise, they wouldn't even be able to get a basic job to survive. When the police chief remained unmoved, the principal mentioned the mayor. He exerted all his influence to pressure the police chief, but the chief remained unmoved, even by the mayor. Recognizing the chief's resolve, the principal tried an old tactic, but it only led to a crackdown. The students all failed and had to repeat the year for cheating. As the principal predicted, they couldn't even find a simple job now. They ended up pulling rickshaws with their older brother. Their father lost his job for refusing to emulate the mayor, leaving the family in dire straits. One day, they were accused of stealing from the mayor, sparking a conflict. The police then took them away. They were treated unfairly. Manoj saw a chance to escape and ran to the new police chief's house for help. He rushed to the police chief's house, seeking justice for himself and his brother, but was told to return the next day. Manoj, frustrated, responded angrily, "You can wait, but we can't. Why were you punctual on exam day? If you showed up daily, I could get a job." The police chief then came down and halted his subordinates. They headed to the police station together. The chief examined the victim, who accused the brothers of breaking his leg, but the lies were soon uncovered. The issue was settled. Before leaving, Manoj asked the police chief how to be like him. The chief smiled and replied, "Be honest." These words deeply affected Manoj, and he vowed to become an honest police officer. The next year, the police chief was transferred due to work reasons. The school went back to its cheating ways, but Manoj stayed honest and graduated on his own merits. His grandmother gave him her savings for the provincial civil service exam, hoping he'd come back in a police uniform. So, Manoj left with excitement, but upon arrival, his backpack was stolen, forcing him to spend the night on the roadside. The next day, he reached the training center, only to learn the exam was cancelled due to budget issues. Still, he refused to leave just like that. Broke and starving, he couldn't take it any longer and begged for food at a restaurant. A wealthy young man named Pundi noticed him. Upon hearing about his plight, Pundi kindly covered his meal and invited him to the capital for the national exam. This newfound purpose gave Manoj direction. After a long journey, he reached the capital, bustling with dreamers from across the country. People bustled on the streets, making Manoj anxious. How could he distinguish himself among so many? He needed guidance from someone experienced. They met Gauri, who had taken the exam 6 times, and he explained the 3-stage process. He told them there were 3 stages: the preliminary exam, the main exam, and the interview. The preliminary exam would eliminate nearly 98% of the candidates. The main exam would further cut down 90%, and after the interview, only a few dozen might make it through. Everyone had just for lifetime attempts, but lower caste individuals got 2 extra tries. Even after failing 5 times, Gauri remained hopeful. Finally, on his 6th try, he reached the interview stage and bought a police uniform, dreaming of returning home in glory. However, Manoj's finances couldn't support such aspirations, so he turned to Gauri, who leveraged his connections to help. He helped Manoj find a job at a library. When Pundi found out, he celebrated with him and shared his own dreams. The next day, Gauri anxiously checked the results list multiple times but didn't see his name. Ultimately, he did not pass. After 6 years of failure, he accepted his fate and opened a tea shop to support other exam takers. Soon, the next year's exam results were announced. Manoj didn't pass the first stage, leaving him very dejected. In such a competitive environment, failure was unavoidable. After that, he redoubled his efforts and assisted Gauri at his tea shop whenever possible. This made Pundi's friend scornful. He remarked that these people traveled all this way but neglected their studies. Instead, they wasted time working. How could they succeed? What was the point? Were they just squandering the country's resources? But his condescending words made Gauri very angry. He said, "Even though we have nothing, we are determined to win. Regardless of our harsh conditions, we won't surrender." Another year went by. Manoj stayed diligent and finally, but it wasn't time to celebrate yet. He needed a coach for the main exam. With a referral, he found a renowned local coaching institute. The walls were lined with success stories, but with only half the tuition fee, he asked if he could pay in installments. The person in charge eventually directed him to fill out a form in the office. There, he noticed a portrait of Deep Mohan, who had claimed in a seminar to be self-taught. Since Deep Mohan had once mistaken Manoj for a tea boy, he owed him a favor, which led Manoj to immediately point out the error. As a result, he was turned away, but this incident led to an unbreakable bond with Dara, guided by fate. They met at the library. Dara saw him holding a book on rockets and assumed he was an engineer in that field. Manoj, feeling inferior, did not deny it. Thus, they built a friendship based on a lie, which gradually blossomed into love. In one class, the professor publicly praised Manoj for his outstanding essay on terrorism in India. He even rewarded him with 2 chocolates, which Manoj gave entirely to Dara. From then on, their relationship grew even sweeter. But beautiful lies always come to light. In a lecture, when the teacher asked about the wildfire rocket launch, Dara claimed Manoj knew the answer. However, the unexpected question exposed his ignorance, causing their relationship to crumble. Manoj quickly apologized. But it was too late. Manoj's life turned bleak, and he was wrongly accused of theft by the librarian. Thus, he lost his job and stopped attending the tutoring center. Instead, he worked and studied in a dimly lit workshop. Pundi questioned how Manoj could study there, and Manoj pointed to his small desk. Pundi urged him to move in with him, because now he needed to focus on preparing for the exam, but Manoj politely declined. However, during the main exam, he faced misfortune. Being from India, English was always a challenge for him, but this time it went surprisingly well because the topic was terrorism in India. However, another examinee pointed out, "You misunderstood, it's about tourism in India." This was difficult for him to accept, and he collapsed, leading to his second exam failure. After failing, he didn't resume studying right away but went to Dara's house. There, her housekeeper informed him she was at her cousin's wedding. But once the housekeeper connected the call, she apologized for her mistake, admitted her error in the main exam, and declared her love passionately. Dara had the housekeeper take the call. Afterward, the housekeeper calmly relayed, "Dara said you should return to New Delhi." She left, heartbroken. After leaving the estate, she didn't resume her studies, but went back to her long-lost hometown. Everything there seemed unchanged, but everything had changed. Her brother had matured, her sister had grown taller, and her grandmother had passed away. Her mother told Manoj. Grandmother had insisted they leave him and his father undisturbed. Their lives had changed, but those lies were pointless. Afterward, Manoj took on more family responsibilities. He worked 15 hours a day, studied for 6 hours, and slept Less than 3 hours. When his father visited, years of failure made him see his integrity as worthless. That seemingly noble act of leaving home actually only hurt his family. So he planned to give up. But Manoj told his father not to give up. At least on the path of justice, he wasn't alone. He promised to work hard to support the family. After saying goodbye to his father, Manoj unexpectedly reunited with Dara. After class, Dara apologized to Manoj, but his family responsibilities made him lose hope in love. He toiled for another year in that dim attic. Dara checked Manoj's exam results and informed him he had advanced to the next round. But Manoj wasn't thrilled, because he still had to face the main exam, which had fewer options and required writing many essays he struggled with. Dara offered to lend him money to improve his situation, but Manoj declined. Despite his knack for finding joy in tough times, the sheer volume of essays in the main exam left him feeling swamped, and he managed to finish only 12 out of 20. As anticipated, he didn't pass. That night, they envisioned their future at Gauri's stall. Pundi's visit changed everything. Confronting Manoj's failure, Pundi blamed Dara, saying he would have passed if they hadn't met, and that she would leave him if he failed. Pundi's accusations hurt Dara deeply. Manoj hurried to stop her from leaving, and she expressed her feelings too. At that moment, Manoj remembered Deep Mohan, who owed him a favor from 3 years ago and could help him. Now a key figure in the Ministry of Home Affairs, Mohan still considered Manoj a friend. Despite the late hour, he didn't turn down Manoj's request. Mohan answered Manoj's questions honestly, leaving Manoj feeling down as he returned to Gauri's stall. Gauri, noticing this, scolded him angrily. He decided to let Manoj move into his room so he could fully focus on his studies. Under Gauri's scolding, Manoj agreed. Thus, Manoj had his own desk, and Dara even gave him a stopwatch and nearly 10 years of past exam papers. Maybe Pundi's words inspired Dara to retake the Provincial Civil Service exam. So, Manoj started. The relentless studying paid off when, under the August sun, for years of effort finally bore fruit. This time, he finally passed the main exam, while Pundi failed yet again. His father's cold words over the phone, and his best friend's preoccupation with his girlfriend angered him, sparking a heated argument. The once inseparable friends parted ways on bad terms. Eventually, Manoj used a public phone booth to reconnect with his family. When they heard from him, his family beamed with joy. As the interview approached, Dara took him to a barber shop. Cleansing the remnants of the past, they went to Pundi's house. True friendship endures. True friendship withstands minor disagreements and rekindles forgotten dreams on the way to the interview. Dara gave Manoj a letter, telling him to read it in private. The rest was up to him. In the waiting hall brimming with the city's top talents, Manoj stood out as the only one from a poor background. During the interview, when asked about repeating a grade, he described the cheating culture in his hometown. When asked about his plans if not selected, he said, "If I can't be a shining sun, I can still be a street lamp, lighting my own path." When he finished, the examiner dismissed him, but the chief examiner said it was a waste of time. This left him utterly bewildered. In the hallway, he found a letter from Dara, where she shared her feelings and proposed marriage. A month later, Dara led Manoj to check the results, but he had lost hope, still haunted by the chief examiner's words. Dara spotted your name on the list and turned, her eyes gleaming with joy. The 4 deputy examiners had been impressed by his honesty that day. This benefits the country's development. If people like him can't be selected, then what's the point of the selection process? 12 years of hard work and dedication have finally paid off at this moment. His family, upon hearing the news, felt immense pride. Manoj is now free to marry his beloved, and the first wedding invitation he sends goes to his mentor. The police chief who once aided him now sees the grown man and feels immense pride. And so, the story ends. His honesty and integrity are traits anyone can have. In ordinary people, this light might not shine as brightly as the sun, not as bright as streetlights, but like fireflies, it can flicker, leaving one's life without regrets. I hope we can always light up the world, bringing love and hope to others. The famous McDonald's was originally stolen. At first, it was just a small drive-in restaurant founded by the McDonald brothers. The well-known founder, Ray Kroc, realized its potential value of billions of dollars just by having a meal there. All it took was adding ketchup and mustard to a bun, 2 pickles, some chopped onions, and a freshly grilled patty. It took less than 30 seconds to make a delicious, aromatic burger. The speed amazed Ray the first time he tried it. He doubted the taste at first, but seeing kids enjoying it, he decided to give it a try. And that's how he ended up founding McDonald's. He started as a milkshake machine salesman, over 50, always on the road. Sleeping in his car and grabbing meals on the run became his norm. Even so, he faced endless rejections until one day, a call changed everything. The customer service team informed him that a restaurant had ordered 6 blenders, which he found surprising. As most restaurants only needed 2, he got the restaurant's number and called them, only to find out they wanted 2 more. They urgently requested delivery, which puzzled Ray. Curious, he drove to California to see for himself. Soon, Ray arrived at the drive-in restaurant, where a long line had already formed. Curious, Ray joined the line and spent just 35 cents on a burger, fries, and a soft drink. To his surprise, the food was ready by the time the cashier gave him his change. This astonished Ray. He took a bite of the burger, and to his surprise, it tasted great. At that moment, a janitor approached him. Ray learned that this man was the owner of the restaurant. Ray introduced himself as the salesman from before, and couldn't help but commend how well it was run. Mac, to his surprise, offered a tour, though the space was small, but it felt spacious. Each person knew their role and handled their tasks efficiently. Ingredients were prepped following a set process. In this assembly line kitchen, it took just 30 seconds to make a burger. Mac told Ray that speed was key to their success. Every step, from grilling to packaging, was streamlined for speed. Ray found this fascinating. How did he come up with all these ideas? Mac explained that it was all his brother Dick's brainchild. That evening, Ray took them out to dinner. Over the meal, they recounted their entrepreneurial journey, starting with a regular car hop restaurant. However, poor quality customers and a complicated menu soon brought their restaurant to the brink of failure. They faced financial losses due to various issues, but eventually learned from their mistakes and revamped their menu. These individual hamburgers, fries, and soft drinks, served with disposable utensils, soon inspired the drive-in restaurant model. It often drew loiterers, so they got rid of the cigarette and alcohol vending machines. They swapped them for trash cans to create a family-friendly atmosphere. But the key factor was reducing serving time. So, the two brothers sketched out the restaurant's interior layout in a park after a day of practice. To attract more customers, they also added entertainment facilities outside. Soon, with the brothers' new model, customer numbers soared, leaving Ray sleepless at the motel. An audacious idea struck him, and the next day he eagerly approached the McDonald brothers to secure their franchise rights. He aimed to make McDonald's a national chain, but Dick had already tried this idea. They opened 5 branches in a row, but all of them ended in failure due to quality control issues. Without the brothers' oversight, the other branches slacked off, resulting in dirty environments and inconsistent menus. This quickly deteriorated the customer experience, and eventually, even the market regulators took notice. To protect McDonald's brand reputation, the brothers ultimately halted expansion. So, they directly rejected Ray's request. Just as Ray was losing hope, a picture grabbed his attention. It was a McDonald's concept drawing. Mac then explained, "This is one of Dick's ideas. He wanted to use a striking design to attract passers-by. There's already one operating this way." Ray rushed to the spot and arrived by evening, amazed by the clever design. Ray was completely hooked. When he got home, he excitedly told his wife, but she poured cold water on his enthusiasm. "You've been struggling for years and haven't succeeded. Why can't you just relax and enjoy life?" But Ray remained determined. This time, without his wife's support, Ray went back to his old life. But his passion was gone. So, he returned to the McDonald brothers and pitched his bold idea. He mentioned how every city he visited had iconic buildings. For example, churches have crosses, and courthouses have flags. They all have their unique significance. Ray aimed to make McDonald's iconic so that whenever people thought of fast food, McDonald's would come to mind. The McDonald brothers were also moved by Ray's vision. After some discussions, they agreed to work with him. To avoid past issues, they drafted a stricter management plan and put everything in writing in the contract. Ray didn't hesitate at all and signed his name, officially securing the franchise rights for McDonald's. However, things weren't that simple. When he sought a bank loan, he was flatly denied. It turned out Ray had already taken out numerous loans for other ventures. Investors also turned him down, so he decided to take another gamble and secretly mortgaged his house to the bank. With the funds, he purchased land, but the McDonald brothers' demands were surprisingly strict. He only wanted to add a stove and storage room. It took 2 weeks just to get their approval. They even outright rejected the Coca-Cola sponsorship he secured. The reason was that they didn't allow any commercial operations that turned the menu into an advertisement, which made them very uncomfortable. However, this didn't affect their ongoing collaboration. With Ray's efforts, the new store finally opened. As the first McDonald's in the area, its operating model quickly attracted many customers. Ray often supervised food quality in the kitchen. If he noticed an employee skimping on pickles, he would promptly remind them to add at least 2 slices. During this period, a young man grilling patties caught his eye. He inquired about the young man's name, who cleaned the area every night after closing. It was clear that this time, he had finally succeeded. With this success, Ray began looking for new franchise investors. In just 1 month, 3 new chain stores were added. But Dick was very unhappy with his approach. He worried that the same old problems would arise again. And indeed, they did. Those investors only cared about making money. They ignored quality control and didn't follow bun standards. If this kept up, McDonald's would end up like any other car hop joint. So, he grabbed a burger and stormed off to confront the investors. The patty was undercooked. Facing the investors, he showed no concern. Ray angrily threw the burger at them and walked away. Other franchise spots also became hangouts for troublemakers. Fed up, Ray ended the partnerships. Just when he was at a loss for the future, a Jewish salesman caught his attention. He rushed out to ask the salesman why a Jewish man was selling Bibles. The salesman simply replied, "To make a living." So, Ray decided to make them the new franchisees. Soon, this McDonald's officially opened. Leonard met Ray's expectations, managing the kitchen daily while his wife gave out free candy outside. With the couple's joint efforts, the restaurant quickly became a local favorite, solidifying Ray's direction for the business. He sought out reliable couples to address quality control, and soon, more people joined the franchise. In no time, McDonald's appeared in Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco, and Ray became a well-known entrepreneur. He occasionally checked on their progress, envisioning a global market. Everything seemed to be going well. However, bad news came. The finance team told Ray their funds were already depleted. The original contract revealed he was only entitled to 1.9% of the profits and had to pay 0.5% monthly to the other party. The remaining money wasn't even enough to cover monthly operations, let alone future. He called the McDonald brothers, hoping to renegotiate the contract, but Dick flatly refused. They had always been against expansion, feeling it went against their original intent. Ray angrily hung up the phone. Worse still, with the broken cash flow, he couldn't repay the loans, and the bank called his home directly. This revealed everything to his wife, who rushed to the bank to confront them, but the bank showed no leniency. That night, franchisees approached him, grumbling about the steep cost of raw materials, which far outstripped their earnings. The cost of keeping ice cream cold was high, with electric bills reaching hundreds of dollars each month. Luckily, they found a fix, swapping ice cream in milkshakes for a longer-lasting milkshake powder. This not only sped up the milkshake making process, but also kept the taste nearly the same. Ray shared the news with the McDonald brothers, but they rejected it again, surprising him. He refused to compromise on ingredients. Cutting corners on raw materials was his bottom line. This negotiation failed once again, completely severing their relationship. Holding the bill, he headed to the bank again for a loan, but he had no collateral left. Someone nearby overheard their conversation. As Ray left the bank, a man named Harry hurried to catch up with him. It altered McDonald's destiny. After examining Ray's records, Harry quickly identified the issue. The previous store, all the franchisees complained about leasing. Ray's role was limited to training and supplying equipment and operational techniques, while Harry believed this approach had significant issues. If they only relied on the 1.4% profit from burgers, they would never grow big no matter what. Then he was advised not to focus solely on making burgers, but to buy large amounts of land and lease it to franchisees. They had to open stores only at his chosen locations, which stabilized initial income. It also allowed him to infinitely expand his capital. Land is a fixed asset, and he could use it to secure bank loans. Then, he could keep acquiring more land, creating a self-sustaining cycle. This approach gave him full control over the franchisees. Franchisees who failed to meet quality standards could be easily removed, sidelining the McDonald brothers and freeing him from their control. With his help, Ray quickly established the Ferrari real estate company and, after securing investment, began purchasing large amounts of land. Even McDonald's properties were acquired, and he gradually shifted his focus to real estate. With Harry at the helm, McDonald's thrived nationwide, becoming the top restaurant chain in the country. And all the land under the stores was in Ray's hands. Upon learning this, Dick immediately questioned Ray, but because of these, it was a separate, legal entity that didn't alter McDonald's operations, leaving Dick powerless to stop him. Now they realized they had been sidelined. Not only that, Ray even bypassed them and supplied milkshake powder to all the franchisees. Despite breaching the contract, Ray was unfazed. Soon after, he adopted the McDonald's golden arches as his company's logo. The brothers, having had enough, decided to take Ray to court. But Ray calmly told them, "You might win the lawsuit, but the high legal fees will crush you." However, Ray didn't push things to the extreme. He eventually bought McDonald's from the brothers for $2.7 million and promised them 1% of the company's profits. But this profit share was only a verbal promise. Despite the unpleasantness, the deal was ultimately completed smoothly. The film is based on true events. Ray Kroc took over McDonald's in 1955. Now, McDonald's boasts over 38,000 locations globally. They are also now the largest commercial real estate company globally. The young man Ray once praised eventually became the CEO of McDonald's, and with that, the film ends. Many might think he was just a thief stealing others' achievements, but the truth is, business is a war without smoke. If you're not strong enough, reality will always be harsh. So, you can't fear losing. If you do, you'll never succeed. The man was downstairs holding flowers when someone secretly snapped a photo and sent it to the KGB. On his way back, he was ambushed by agents who dragged him into an alley and beat him up, forcing him to return to his country. All because he wanted to secure the rights to Tetris. After playing it for just 5 minutes, he saw a glimmer of hope. He quickly secured the Japanese rights and the next day, snuck into Nintendo's headquarters under the guise of needing the restroom. He met with Nintendo's president, Yamauchi, and pitched the highly captivating game. Yamauchi offered $500,000 for the rights. He declined the offer, aiming higher. He envisioned launching the game alongside Nintendo. But Nintendo had no precedent for external collaborations. Hank persuaded them that cooperation would be a win-win, like Mario having Luigi. Hank's argument won over Yamauchi, who agreed to co-publish the game, but Hank had to fund the initial production. So, he turned to a familiar bank manager for a loan. He was ready to mortgage all his assets for a $3 million loan, but the manager hesitated because his last loan was still unpaid. Hank convinced him by revealing his partnership with Nintendo, putting all his faith in their brand. The manager finally agreed to the loan. Hank used a simple method to convince his wife, showing her how the game kept their child quiet. The house was finally peaceful, proving the game's charm and giving the company a chance to revive. The following day, Spectrum Holobyte called to inform him that Robert's son, Kevin, now held the Tetris rights. Kevin immediately revoked his license and sold it to Sega, Nintendo's arch-rival, but he still needed the computer and video game rights. He had to accept this harsh reality, and his wife stopped development, nearly bankrupting them again. So, Hank went to Yamauchi, explained his crisis, and asked for an advance on Nintendo's payment to get through it. Yamauchi suggested he go to Nintendo's Seattle office, where he might find an opportunity. So, Hank went to the Seattle branch. After signing confidentiality agreements, he saw the new handheld console. Nintendo had planned to bundle it with Mario, but Hank argued that this would only sell to a few 100,000 kids. To sell it globally, it had to be bundled with Tetris. After testing it, Nintendo decided to buy the rights to Tetris. Meanwhile, Stein was negotiating with the father and son. It turned out that after selling the rights to Spectrum Holobyte, Robert hadn't paid any royalties, so Stein had no money to pay the Soviet government. Since the Soviets hadn't been paid, they wouldn't discuss the handheld rights. Then Hank showed up and asked if they had those rights. Kevin lied, saying Stein had all the rights. When Hank tried to negotiate for the handheld rights, Kevin promptly kicked him out. Kevin pushed Stein to secure a full contract and offered the Soviets a share of the royalties, but Robert declined. Robert claimed he was friends with Prime Minister Gorbachev and was helping publish his memoirs, so he didn't need to worry about the rights. Hank cornered Stein downstairs, trying to buy the handheld rights. Stein initially wanted to brush him off with an excuse, but when Stein heard the $25,000 offer, he quickly agreed to Hank's deal. However, once Hank was back in Japan, Nintendo called him. Stein intended to sell the handheld rights to Atari for $100,000. Kevin found out and confronted him about breaking the contract. Facing an enraged Kevin ready to hit him, Stein had to admit he didn't have the handheld rights. Kevin then terminated their partnership. Kevin decided to negotiate directly with the Soviets, and Hank also decided to go to Moscow. However, a business visa would take months to process. So, he decided to go as a tourist, a serious crime in the Soviet Union, risking KGB arrest. Nintendo, based in the US, couldn't assist and warned him against risking his life. Yet, without the rights, Hank faced total ruin. So, he had to risk his life. As soon as he landed, he was hassled by security, who found out he had lived in the US. They quickly copied his passport and sent it to the KGB. Hank then checked into a hotel and began searching for the Electronics Union's address. The cautious hotel staff informed the KGB of Hank's activities. He scoured the city for any leads on the Electronics Union. But he found nothing. One day, outside the hotel, he met a beautiful girl named Sasha. With Sasha's help, Hank finally located the Electronics Union building. Sasha cautioned him that foreigners weren't allowed in government buildings. Hank dismissed the warning and entered. While talking to the receptionist, he ran into Yevich, who handled game rights. Hank told Yevich he was the Japanese publisher of Tetris and wanted to buy the handheld rights. The KGB monitored their entire conversation. Because the KGB agents didn't speak English, they called Sasha to translate. Once he grasped the situation, Yevich stated they had never authorized. The Tetris rights were only signed for computer games, despite Hank explaining the authorization source. However, Yevich still deemed it an illegal copy. Hank vowed to fix the issue and return for the handheld rights. Yevich agreed to meet him at 9 a.m. the next day. Hank needed to make a long-distance call to prove himself, but such lines were scarce in the Soviet Union. Luckily, his hotel had one, but the wait could be hours, and fax machines were only in government buildings. The moment Hank stepped outside, the KGB grabbed him, warning that foreigners couldn't enter government buildings and ordering him to leave the country immediately. That night, Kevin also arrived in the Soviet Union. Henk insisted on obtaining the handheld rights. The KGB, now controlling the Soviet Foreign Trade Bureau, threatened to arrest him if confirmed and mentioned that other buyers had arrived, urging him to handle the capitalists well. Henk seized the moment to praise Alexei's game, promising to make him a millionaire if he secured the rights. Alexei, however, explained he couldn't profit in the Soviet Union and wanted to clear his name regarding arcade and electronic rights. Yevich was shocked to hear about arcade rights, as they had only sold computer rights, revealing a major misunderstanding. Henk quickly reviewed their contracts, while Yevich questioned Kevin about authorizing Henk for video game rights. Kevin, claiming he wasn't involved in daily affairs, dodged the question and shifted focus to handheld rights. Yevich turned and left abruptly. Henk soon discovered a loophole: the contract didn't define addendi. The sole distinction between a console and a computer was the keyboard, so Stein hadn't technically stolen the rights. Thus, Henk's rights were valid. Clearly, Stein had deceived them, but he had actually taken the arcade rights. Yevich immediately redefined computer and added an arcade rights fee, forcing Stein to re-sign the contract. Only then would he resume talks on handheld rights. Stein stalled, claiming he needed a night to review the contract. Yevich wrapped up Henk's talks and asked Alexei to dinner, but Alexei refused, citing Soviet laws against inviting foreigners home. In the end, Yevich left Henk a note. When he got home, he found it was an address and a meeting time. Meanwhile, Kevin, who had been stood up, found the KGB officer. The officer asked Kevin for a bribe to secure the rights. Kevin instantly refused and called his father, Robert. They finally reached a $400,000 agreement to help Spectrum Holoby get the rights. Henk went to Alexei's house. They had a friendly chat and even improved the game after dinner, but a sudden visit from a neighbor scared the couple. They immediately asked Henk to leave. His movements had already been photographed and sent to the KGB. Henk was dragged into an alley by waiting agents. He was beaten hard and forced to return to China, and his wife in Japan also received a warning from the Soviet embassy that his hotel room was also turned into a mess. This is Sasha, who noted his room was similar. Henk couldn't grasp why he was seen as a threat when he only wanted to help. Sasha clarified that foreigners trying to buy Soviet property were always viewed with suspicion. This was treason to a lot of people, and the next day it was finally Henk's turn to make an international call, and he asked his wife to get a licensing contract for the software. He sent the new handheld contract to the Soviet Electronic Union by fax. Just as his wife was about to bring up the Soviet threats, the phone line went dead. Henk couldn't dwell on it, but he encountered Stein at the hotel entrance. Stein then went to the Union building and signed a new contract. Yevich refused to talk about the handheld rights. Henk, seeing their ploy, angrily expressed his frustration. He proclaimed he was the only honest one there, but Koyevich believed they were all alike. At that moment, a fax from Henk's wife arrived. It confirmed that Henk was not a game-stealing fraud. Then, they offered $25,000 plus a 25-cent royalty per unit. He aimed to buy the global handheld rights, which could mean a $5 million profit. Yevich immediately went out to negotiate, but a KGB officer intervened, demanding he sell the rights to Mirasoft. Kevin, however, intended to spend nothing. He proposed trading the rights for 100 books. Even with KGB pressure, Yevich felt agreeing would seem suspicious. Kevin had to add another $1 million, but Yevich wanted to push for more. However, a KGB officer intervened, forcing Yevich to sign a letter of intent, committing to payment within a week. Yevich then secretly took Henk aside and told him he had 1 week to make an offer for the global handheld rights. He offered to buy the global handheld rights and signed a letter of intent with Henk. It turned out Yevich was acting in the national interest. Despite his efforts to evade KGB surveillance, he was still photographed, leading to Yevich facing backlash from his superiors. Soon after, Bulletproof Software offered Nintendo the handheld rights for Tetris. Henk, back in Japan, received a fax ending their partnership and containing threatening photos, meaning he had lost the video game rights too. He also faced the threat of a lawsuit from Nintendo, and Yevich, unwilling to let jinxing software off easily, covertly took their signed letter of intent. Let Alexei pass it to Henk, and when he comes to the office, he uses cigarette butts to light trash cans to attract attention. Secretly handed the letter of intent to Henk. Upon reading it, Henk realized Yevich's plan and that Robert never intended to pay the $1 million. He intended to deceive Nintendo into a contract using the letter of intent. Henk went straight to Nintendo and revealed Bulletproof Software's scheme. Both parties signed an intent letter with the Electronic Federation. If they paid before Bulletproof, they could secure the global handheld rights. Henk insisted they fly to Moscow with him right away. But as soon as they arrived, the KGB found out. Soon after, Alexei was fired and faced retaliation. His child was expelled from school, and his life was threatened by officials. They warned him that if he continued to help Henk, he would disappear. Henk rushed to the Federation and offered $5 million to buy the rights for video games, arcade games, and handheld consoles. He suggested increasing the royalties to 50 cents. Just before signing, Sasha stepped in, citing the need to protect national assets. The contract required review, causing a one-day delay. The bribed officer quickly called Robert, demanding $1 million within 24 hours. He still had a chance to secure the Tetris rights. Just then, a furious Stein appeared, accusing Kevin of meddling and forcing him into a new contract. Realizing the gravity of losing the video game rights, Robert rushed to the Soviet Union, where Premier Gorbachev received him. He urged the Prime Minister to step in, warning of a capitalist takeover. But with the Soviet Union nearing collapse, they had bigger issues to address. He had to turn to the KGB chief for assistance. When Henk saw Alexei again, Alexei felt exploited, thinking he hadn't made any money. Henk was about to assure Alexei he'd ensure he got paid, but Alexei interrupted him abruptly. The next day, Robert forced Yevich to sign a contract. He not only refused to pay, but also demanded all the rights. Just then, Henk walked in. Henk offered Yevich a fair deal. Robert threatened with the KGB, but Yevich insisted he pay $1 million up front. But Robert remained stubborn. Henk then realized Robert was broke, explaining the unpaid royalties. Nintendo CEO also guessed that Robert was bankrupt. Seeing this, Yevich directly signed the contract with Henk and warned them to run quickly. Moscow was no longer safe. When the KGB officer arrived, he discovered Robert was broke and urgently asked about his money. At that moment, Sasha understood the officer's treachery. Robert assured him that if he regained the rights, he would grant the officer 50% ownership. Henk was immediately detained, but Alexei arrived just in time to help them flee. Meanwhile, Sasha directly reported the officer's betrayal. Alexei and the agents pursued Henk and his team through Moscow, finally cornering them at the airport. Henk immediately bought the nearest flight. As they were about to board, their superior rushed into the airport and ordered a flight to Tokyo. However, Henk wasn't on that plane. They had taken a different flight. As the superior was about to leave, Sasha intervened. He was arrested for abuse of power and corruption. Thus, Henk successfully secured the national rights to Tetris. As the game spread like wildfire globally, Alexei received an invitation from Henk. He moved to the US with his family. Later, they founded a Tetris company together. The story ends here. A young boy saw a Ford Mustang for the first time. He eagerly opened the car door to look inside, but was told by the Mustang rep not to touch the pricey vehicle. With a forced smile, the representative asked him to step back. The boy relayed this to his father and quickly withdrew his hand. But his father wasn't as patient. He mocked the car's flashy interior and suggested replacing the engine with an L6 engine. He suggested shortening the wheelbase to cut half a ton of weight, but even then, he'd still pick a Chevrolet. The car was just too bad. This man wasn't just all talk. His name was Miles, a professional racer and a champion of multiple events. They attended the Mustang launch because his friend Shelby told him that Ford wanted to build a race car to beat Ferrari at Le Mans. It turned out that not long ago, Ford had tried to buy the nearly bankrupt Ferrari. The old man almost agreed, but they took away his only hobby, which made him furious. When Ford II learned of this, he resolved to create a race car for Le Mans to outshine Ferrari. They found Shelby and tasked him with building the race car to beat Ferrari. But it wasn't just about money, they also needed a driver. Shelby immediately thought of Miles. The two teamed up to create the legendary Ford GT40. Miles began testing and tuning the car day and night, constantly reducing its weight and improving its grip. He discarded everything unnecessary and replaced the engine with a V8, pushing the horsepower to the limit. With continuous modifications and adjustments, the GT40 kept breaking records. The day before the race, the humiliated representative informed Shelby that Miles didn't match the company's image and had to be replaced. Despite Shelby's strong objections, the decision was final, and without Miles, Ford predictably lost the race. The reason was that they pushed the cars too hard, causing the gearboxes to overheat. After this, Shelby sought out Miles again. He knew they couldn't beat Ferrari without Miles, so to convince Ford of Miles' capabilities, Shelby did something crazy. One day, Ford II made a surprise visit to see the race car he had spent millions on. First, he took the vice president upstairs. Then, he locked him in a room and invited the boss to take a ride. The reason for this was simple. He wanted Miles to have a shot at racing. When the boss agreed, Shelby took him on a wild ride. By the end, Ford II was so scared he cried. Shelby seized the moment to say that Miles could drive this car and help them beat Ferrari. Seeing Ford II say that everything was now in the vice president's hands, Shelby made a proposal. He proposed that Miles compete in a Daytona endurance race first. If Miles won, he could race at Le Mans. If not, Shelby's company would go to Ford. Then, Miles entered the Daytona race. Right from the start, Miles' exceptional skills put him far ahead. But when other drivers took over midway, they fell behind by the second day. They realized they couldn't turn the tide without Miles. Seeing the vice president already celebrating, Shelby wrote something on a sign and walked to the trackside. Not long after, Miles saw it. The sign read, "Rev to 7,000 RPM. Go for it." Then, the GT40 roared to life. With the engine symphony, Miles overtook one competitor after another. As the race neared its final stretch, Miles seized the moment, shifted gears, and accelerated. When the checkered flag waved, Miles dominated the race, clinching their entry ticket and saving his friend's career. Meanwhile, the VP was livid, his face flushed with anger. That night, Miles timidly joined the victory party, hinting at his growing humility. In June 1966, Miles arrived in Paris, France. Facing the race the next day, he was nervous and anxious, having never competed there before. So, he went to the track to familiarize himself. Shelby, who also couldn't sleep, joined him, aware that this could be both the start of his triumph and its end. They shared a mutual understanding. The following day, the Grand Le Mans race went on as planned, with a full audience. Meanwhile, Miles' family watched by the TV. They watched the race with excitement. As the race began, the drivers quickly dashed to their cars. A head start is crucial, but Miles's door won't close. He can't worry about it now. He must escape the danger zone, but accidents keep occurring ahead. The door opens again, forcing him to hold it while driving and complete the first lap. Ferrari's number 21 is leading, and Miles is missing, worrying Ford's team. Suddenly, Miles arrives at the pit stop, still clutching the car door. The pit crew struggled with the door for a bit, but it wouldn't move. Finally, a team member took a hammer and gave it a solid whack. Only then did Miles feel confident enough to return to the track. With so much time lost, he floored the gas pedal and sped off. Using his expertise, Miles swiftly moved up to 20th place, passing cars and setting a new record. The fastest lap record was set by Miles with an average speed of 229 miles per hour, which is quite impressive. 36.5 kilometers per hour. The spectators outside were thrilled. When he reached the pit stop, Miles took a moment to rest, hydrate, and eat to regain his strength. Shelby asked, "Can you keep going?" Miles responded, "I'm fine, no worries." 8 hours into the race, lightning lit up the pitch-black sky. Despite the long drive, the car was still performing well. With a full tank and fresh tires, Miles set off once again. 2 hours later, it started to rain. In such harsh conditions, for every driver, it was a true test of skill. Eventually, Miles caught up with the Ferrari, and the two cars raced side by side on the straightaway. Seeing Miles' performance made the vice president anxious, so he called Shelby's team. Coincidentally, Shelby witnessed it all and luckily stepped in just in time, stopping Miles from noticing the slowdown sign. On the track, Miles was unstoppable, but the faster he went, the greater the strain on the brakes. Yet, Miles had no choice but to keep pushing the limits. As he overtook and entered the curve, the brakes suddenly failed, which was a known issue with the GT40. When Miles reached the pit stop, the Ferrari he had just passed zoomed by again. Luckily, they had already analyzed this issue. But changing parts takes time, and meanwhile, the Ferrari completed another lap. This made Miles frantically urge them to hurry. Shelby tells him, "You need to pass them twice." After a night of chasing, Miles finally catches Ferrari number 21. To make up for the lost lap, Miles pushed himself to the limit. Both cars had powerful engines, making it tough to see who was quicker on the straights. But in the corners, braking later and nailing the right line through turns truly tested their skill and courage. Both drivers were secretly competing. But the Ferrari driver lost his nerve first. Even though Miles had made up a lap, he knew he had to keep pushing. This lap would be the toughest. The race had been going for 18 hours, and the remaining cars had been battered for 18 hours. In the meantime, Miles overtook one opponent after another until the Ferrari came back into view. They returned to the same corner they had just entered together, racing side by side once more, both chasing victory. Another fierce battle ensued, but suddenly, the Ferrari's engine blew. This formidable team was out of the race, and now Miles not only became the king of the track, but also led his teammates. When he returned to the pit, he slumped wearily in a corner. Just then, Ford's plane returned. Upon hearing they had beaten Ferrari, everyone was overjoyed. The vice president started sucking up. He then proposed that all three GT40s cross the finish line together for a more spectacular display, and to show off Ford's strength. What was even more infuriating was that Ford II agreed. Given Miles' current lead, he could easily win the race, but now he would have to slow down and share the victory with the others. Shelby was furious when he heard this. It was an insult to the other drivers and tore their dignity to shreds. As the vice president departed, he remarked, "Mr. Ford wants to see your loyalty." Pressured by corporate demands, Shelby had to inform Miles and let Miles make his own decision. Before returning to the track, Miles glanced at the executives and then at Shelby. He appeared resolute and kept racing, refusing to slow down or align with the other two cars. Instead, he accelerated, zooming down the track. The demands only ignited his fighting spirit, angering the vice president. Fuming, he called downstairs once more, but Shelby told everyone to ignore the phone. Meanwhile, Miles kept accelerating, growing more exhilarated. He repeatedly passed his teammates, seemingly to prove he was the track's true speed king. His teammates speculated. They speculated he was aiming to break his own record again. The crowd chanted Miles' name. This legendary name echoed throughout the racetrack. When he finished this lap, he shattered his own record again. Just then, the vice president stormed down and demanded Shelby pull him in. Otherwise, the International Automobile Federation would step in. Meanwhile, Miles kept racing and singing at 200 miles per hour. No one was in his rearview mirror. Every new record was a personal triumph. The Le Mans trophy was just ahead at the finish line. Unexpectedly, he let out a deep sigh. As a husband and father, and a man in his mid-40s, he had to give up some things. Perhaps in this race, Miles got everything he wanted. He calmly downshifted and slowed down. He ended this game of chess with capital. Everyone was incredulous that Miles made such a decision. When his teammates caught up, the three cars drove side by side at a steady speed as Ford had requested. This had never happened in previous races. It once again brought applause and cheers, praising Miles' bravery and broad-mindedness. As the checkered flag waved, the three GT40s crossed the line together. His son cheered for his father. Miles had a smile on his face, but the happiest was for the second, thinking about the 200-pound big guy. But unexpectedly, the nasty part wasn't over. As Miles was about to celebrate victory, people overlooked him. They shifted their attention to McLaren, revealing the vice president's scheme. McLaren's starting point was further back. His extra mileage was ruled as the winning distance. In the end, Miles' efforts went unnoticed. This incident became a major scandal at the time. Shelby wanted to tear the vice president apart for his scheme. Miles could have been the first to win the Triple Crown. When he glanced up, he saw old man Enzo tipping his hat. This gave Miles some peace. As they departed, they talked about further car modifications, walking side by side into the sunset. When they got back, they dove right into working on the car. But 2 months later, Miles' brakes failed again. In an instant, both he and the car vanished into the dust. The distance was too far to save him. This time, a legendary racer was lost forever. Months passed, but Shelby couldn't move on. One day, he visited Miles' family. Seeing them brought some comfort. They were much stronger than imagined. Once he sat back in the car, he couldn't control his tears. But life had to go on. By 2024, Ken Miles was deeply respected by car enthusiasts and was inducted into the Automotive Hall of Fame. Carroll Shelby became one of the most successful and famous car designers in history. The GT40 they built secured for consecutive Le Mans championships. Meanwhile, on an amateur football field, an arrogant individual showed up. He mocked the player's skills right in front of the coach. The coach handed him the ball and said, "Let's see your skills." He took the ball, lined up at the penalty spot, and calmly scored. Then he netted another in the corner, impressing the other players. A textbook goal. Such exquisite kicking skills seemed professionally trained. In fact, he used to play for West Ham United in the Premier League. But after not making the team, he lost his confidence and drive to play. At only 20, he decided to retire. With no diploma or work experience, he ended up as a delivery driver, but with few orders, his income was so low he couldn't afford rent. So, the cramped van became his shelter. The coach didn't want his skills to go to waste, so he invited him to join the England team for this year's Homeless World Cup in Rome. Vinny doubted their chances. He didn't realize this was a top-tier amateur football event and an ideal chance for him to rebuild his confidence and find redemption. Many participants, like Vinny, had faced tragic events, which is why it's called the Homeless World Cup. Yet, Vinny still lacked the courage to return to the field. So he refused the coach, but the coach didn't give up and handed Vinny a business card, hoping he would consider this chance to showcase his talent. At a cafe, Vinny saw familiar faces on TV, reminding him of the times he played alongside them. He realized his love for football was unforgettable, his childhood favorite. With a resigned attitude, he joined the amateur team and traveled to bustling Rome, where over 70 countries were represented, mostly by people who had lost their way. After the grand opening, the team headed to the hotel provided by the organizers. Vinny felt the soft mattress, feeling a comfort she hadn't experienced in ages. But her joy quickly faded when she discovered her roommate was an addict. She complained to the coach, but he said his hands were tied. So, Vinny left the hotel and wandered to the riverside alone. Gazing at the serene water, his heart remained restless. The cheerful children in the square did nothing to ease his confusion. As dusk fell and the sky darkened, Vinny, accustomed to solitude, spent the night in the square. The next day, as the match against South Africa was about to start, Vinny was still missing. This left everyone on edge. Luckily, Vinny showed up just in time, and after the cheers, he was shocked. He discovered the South African team was absent. The chairman, looking regretful, explained they had issues and couldn't participate. However, this was good news for the England team because they could get 3 points for free. If they won the second match, they could advance from the group stage early. Then, in the third match against Japan, they could play more relaxed and even strategically choose their opponents. However, in the second match, the Portuguese team dominated them. Their offense faltered, and their defense was weak. The referee appeared to favor Portugal. When the coach protested, he was given a red card and ejected, forcing Vinny onto the field. Vinny, rusty from not playing for ages, seemed puzzled, but his muscle memory kicked in once he hit the field. Using basic moves, he got incredible results. They soon scored, but halftime broke their momentum. During the break, with the coach penalized, Vinny had to step up and plan the tactics. But Vinny's plan was straightforward: get the ball to him. The tall player, however, had his own strategy and ignored this after the break. He refused to pass to Vinny, but fortunately, the blonde player scored. Then Vinny took over, scoring repeatedly with his excellent skills. Under his leadership, they won the match. Their points reached 6, allowing them to advance early. So, they could watch other matches, but due to Japan's aging team, they lost 0-12. Noticing Japan's weakness, the England team grew overconfident, already planning their ideal final match opponents. They wanted an easy route to the finals and began fantasizing about lifting the trophy. But the world is unpredictable, and even the best-laid plans can go awry. On that day, the team that hadn't shown up suddenly appeared at the hotel entrance. They looked strong. Vinny showed off his ball skills, impressing their coach. This was the South African team, the tournament favourites. They arrived late because of travel document issues, and their leader tried to convince Vinny to play a match with them. Though Vinny was non-committal, the other team remained confident. The following day, the chairman, elated, praised Vinny for agreeing to a rematch with the South African team. However, his teammates were furious with him. But at this point, the coach had no choice but to agree. So, the team had to buckle down and train hard. However, during practice, Vinny faced criticism for being aloof and self-centered. Agreeing to the match without consulting the team risked early elimination. When Blondie reproached him, Vinny angrily stormed off to the hotel. Blondie said sorry, but Vinny remained upset. He admitted to the team that he was wrong. He wanted to find Vinny alone, but the team insisted on going together. They searched the entire city but couldn't find him until nightfall. They eventually located him sitting on a bench in the square. To help him open up, the teammates shared their own stories. Slowly, Vinny started to feel like part of the team. However, in the next match, Blondie was off his game, making mistakes that cost England 2 goals. The teammates were puzzled and kept urging him to focus, but he stayed off his game. The coach couldn't watch anymore, so he took Blondie out, but it didn't shift the momentum. The South African team still won 3-0. This left England, who had a chance to advance, facing elimination. They now needed to beat Japan by over 8 goals to move to the quarter-finals, to secure a spot in the quarter-finals. However, the Japanese team, determined not to leave with regrets, posed a significant challenge. Their team leader motivated them, acknowledging their aging players and the over 20 goals they had conceded in 2 matches. They wouldn't give up their desire to score. The Japanese players came to Rome to escape the darkness of Japan and see the long-lost sunlight. Encouraged by their leader, they resolved to give their all in the final match, which ignited their fighting spirit to its peak. Their fierce determination quickly resulted in 2 goals, putting England on the edge. In the final moments, the goalkeeper cleared the ball, passing it to Vinny, who dribbled to midfield and unleashed a powerful shot. The ball found the net just before the final whistle. England narrowly advanced. There were no losers in this match. Japan overcame themselves and successfully scored 2 goals. But the joy of England's advancement quickly faded when Blondie withdrew from the tournament in his struggle to quit drugs. But he neglected his medication, which severely impacted his mental state, forcing him to leave for treatment. Seeing his teammate go, Vinny felt uneasy. Although they had their conflicts, they had also fought side by side. In the following matches, Vinny gave his all, leading the team to the semifinals, where they were set to face the host, Italy. But before the match, Beardy, a Kurdish Syrian, refused to play against the Syrian Turkmen. He didn't want the civil war to affect the game, leaving them 2 players short. Per the rules, if a team lacks a player, they can temporarily borrow a player from another team. The chairman brought in an Argentine who they believed would be strong, but he was actually a mole. In the match against Italy, Vinny earned a free kick, but the Argentine took it instead. He stood at the penalty spot, looking like a pro, but he launched the ball way over the goal. His frustrated expression fooled everyone else, but not Vinny, the former pro. Vinny clashed with his teammates and got a yellow card. The coach tried to argue, but got a red card and was sent off. Beardy, who had been indifferent on the sidelines, decided to put aside external issues, and with renewed energy, rejoined the game to bolster the defense. However, time was slipping away, and England remained 1 goal behind. 2 minutes later, Vinny could play. As soon as he got on the field, he made an impact. Seeing a pass from a teammate, he executed a perfect bicycle kick, sending the ball into the opponent's net and tying the game. The crowd went wild. As the match continued, neither team could break the tie, and the referee signaled the end of regular play. A penalty shootout was next. The tension was palpable. Italy went first and scored. Beardy stepped up for England and scored as well. Then Italy missed, and so did England. Now they were back on equal footing. Italy scored again, and the pressure mounted on Vinny. With everyone watching, he took his shot, but it missed. Time seemed to stand still. Once again, England faltered at the penalty shootout. Despite the loss, their fighting spirit was recognized by others. However, Vinny was deeply self-critical for missing the penalty. The rekindled determination was swiftly extinguished, leaving just a spark. His teammates attempted to console him, but he continued to mock his teammates' skills and himself. After speaking, Vinny turned and walked away again, looking so desolate in the sunlight. The time Vinny spent playing football, which should have built his confidence, had instead become a prison, trapping him in the shadows. Meanwhile, the coach shared a secret about Vinny. He had been a scout and spotted Vinny's talent at a young age. His speed was lightning fast, and his style was fierce like a tiger. He could nearly control the game effortlessly. To the coach, he was exceptional. But the first-team coach didn't think he measured up. This crushed him, leaving him aimless and heartbroken. Noticing Vinny's struggles, the coach brought him here on purpose. The competition was supposed to help him regain his footing, and it nearly did. But now it felt like they were starting over. The coach was at a loss. The chairman advised him to consult the South African team leader who had just beaten the American team. They easily made it to the finals, but a player got hurt during the game. The morning breeze blew softly as the train sound faded away. It jolted Vinny awake. Realizing the match was imminent, he sprang up and dashed to the field. He was incredibly anxious and rushed to the field, but security stopped him just as the match was starting. He begged the security to let him in, but the referee had already started the match. Vinny had to watch from outside. His heart raced with anxiety, but to his surprise, his teammates quickly scored. The American team, however, soon retaliated. They countered with a strong volley, swiftly finding their rhythm and putting England on the back foot. Their star player watched anxiously from the sidelines, eager to help but unable to change the situation. But with a goal from the bearded player, their team spirit began to shine. Ultimately, through their collective effort, they clinched an impressive third place. As Vinny stood outside, ready to leave, the South African team leader came up to him. The coach had already talked to the team leader, who invited Vinny to fill in for an injured player. Vinny initially declined. However, the South African team leader's words struck a chord with Vinny. He donned their jersey and returned to the field. Amid the cheers from the England team, the eagerly awaited final between South Africa and Italy was set to start. They were vying for the championship. Vinny swiftly netted the first goal, dedicating it to the injured player. He showed true sportsmanship and swiftly got back into the game. Even with Vinny and the South African team's efforts, Italy couldn't score again after their initial goal. During the match, Vinny found his old courage again. The ball at his feet moved with grace and agility. Shortly after, the referee's whistle marked the match's end. The South African team, having won, invited Vinny to the award ceremony. However, being a foreign player, he wasn't eligible under the rules. As he started to leave, the coach came over and put a medal around his neck. The coach sincerely said, "You deserve this honor as part of the England team." He then pulled out a notebook and explained why he brought Vinny to the match. The story ends here. It is based on true events, telling the tale of a player. Due to harsh criticism from a top coach, he lost his confidence and became a wanderer. Once a striking figure on the field, now he could only travel by car. On his journey, he was like others who had lost their way. Yet, everyone's life is an ongoing symphony, able to create beautiful and magnificent music.